When I heard her voice, weakly apologizing, I was stunned. I've always known her to be strong-willed and assertive. It was the first time I had ever heard her voice sound so fragile. Such a weak voice didn't suit her at all. That's why I decided to confront whoever was tormenting her. This incident would greatly change the dynamics between her and me. My name is James, a 28-year-old working as a nurse. Nowadays, my paycheck is steady, and I never have to worry about putting food on the table, but it wasn't always this way. My family was slightly well off, and I attended a prestigious middle and high school. Back then, I was a typical nerdy kid with glasses. I didn't have many friends, but I never felt lonely. But I did have a friend, or perhaps a rival. Her name was Catherine. I assumed she didn't like me because she was always tough with me, but it turned out that wasn't the case. Catherine was simply very competitive. You see, we always competed for the top spots in our grades. Since middle school, we had been in the same class. I thought she was just a classmate, but one day she declared, "You're my rival," so I guess that's what we were. Whenever Catherine lost to me in tests or rankings, she would get incredibly frustrated. She had tutors and even attended after-school programs, so she hated losing to someone like me, who did nothing special. All I did was study because, well, I had no friends and nothing else to do. At first, I found her confrontations annoying, but eventually, that feeling faded. Perhaps it was because I got to see her hard-working side. Catherine's father ran a successful business, and she admired him greatly. "I'll take over the company in the future." That is what she professed to those around her. And it wasn't just talk. She was genuinely dedicated to her studies and even played sports to build her physical stamina. She was also actively involved in student council and volunteering. Back then, I didn't have any particular dreams or goals. But watching her work tirelessly towards her dreams was truly inspiring. She had a strong personality, but it was a sign of confidence and was cool. Catherine had charisma, always surrounded by people. She might have been bossy or demanding towards me, her rival, but she was generally great with people and had an uncanny ability to read the room. The opposite of me, who has no friends. She had everything I lacked. That's probably why I was drawn to her, and thinking back, I probably had feelings for her. But then, a life-changing event happened. The company my dad worked for went bankrupt, and he lost his job. Devastated, my mom's health declined and she was hospitalized. Staying in an expensive private school was out of the question, so I had to drop out of high school. News about my father's company going under and my dropping out spread like wildfire throughout the school. Everyone started treating me like I was delicate. But it was Catherine, of all people, who reached out to me during those times. "Why are you quitting? What about college? You could take out student loans and continue your education." Of course, I had thought about that, but considering our current financial situation and my parents' emotional state, I felt it was hard to continue attending a private high school. I explained this to Catherine, but she glared at me with tears in her eyes. "You were my rival. Why, fine. I hate you anyway." The expression on Catherine's face when she yelled was more of sadness than anger. Being the smart girl Catherine was, I believe she understood my family's circumstances. Yet, she probably couldn't sort out her feelings. I couldn't shed a tear when my parents informed me about the company's bankruptcy, nor when I realized I couldn't continue in high school. I felt I had no choice but to accept it. That's why seeing her, who could express her emotions so freely, felt so refreshing. I eventually dropped out of high school and lost contact with Catherine. I worked part-time jobs to save up money. With my parents' encouragement, 2 years later, I took the entrance exam for another high school and started my high school life over. During my mother's hospital stay, I was inspired by a nurse who took care of her, so after high school, I went on to nursing school. My second time in high school and my time in nursing school were financially tough for our family of 3, but we managed to pull through together. After I started working as a nurse, our financial situation gradually improved, and now both my parents and I live a stable life. Then, in my 4th year of working as a nurse, I ran into Catherine at the hospital. She came in as a patient. At first, I thought, could it be someone with the same name? But when I saw her lying in the hospital bed, it was undoubtedly Catherine, my former classmate. She always had a cute face since our student days, but she had grown even more beautiful as an adult. I thought she probably wouldn't be single for long with all the male attention she might be getting, but I kept that thought to myself. Upon seeing me, Catherine looked surprised, but quickly resumed her assertive expression. "It's been a while since you dropped out of high school, right? Giving up and settling for a life without a diploma. What a loser." Her provocative tone was oddly familiar, making me chuckle. It has been a while. It took me 2 years, but I did return to high school. Thanks to that, I even became a nurse. Upon hearing this, Catherine looked at my badge and smiled just a tad. However, she quickly reverted to her assertive demeanor. "Well, that's great for you. I mean, it doesn't concern me, but good for you, I guess." It seemed she had been genuinely worried about me after I dropped out of high school. I wish she could just admit her feelings. Seems like some things never change. She's still so tough with me, even now. After Catherine graduated from a prestigious university, she joined her father's company and has been working hard ever since. I was genuinely happy to learn she was still pursuing the dreams she talked about in high school. "It's impressive. You always said you'd take over your dad's company. You're really making it happen. Truly amazing." When I said this, Catherine turned her head down. "It's not that big a deal. I still have a long way to go. My dad, he doesn't really recognize my efforts." Her voice trembled, and I couldn't find any words to comfort her. Not wanting to dwell on the topic, I desperately tried to change the subject. Then, I remembered why I had visited her room in the first place. "Would you mind if I took care of you while you're here?" She quickly looked up. "Take care. As your primary nurse, I want to help until you're discharged." Catherine bluntly responded, "Fine." But I knew that she was just playing coy. "Let's make this a good stay. If you need anything, just let me know." She replied softly, "Thanks." And so, the beautiful girl from my past became my patient. Catherine was admitted because of a severe stomach ulcer. If she had come to the hospital earlier, it might have been better, but in Catherine's case, even the doctors were shocked at how advanced her symptoms were. Knowing her, she might have prioritized her work and endure the pain. I hope she could at least have a stress-free stay in the hospital, but for some reason, she was incredibly demanding, but only towards me. "Hey, can you get me that shampoo from the gift shop? Could you grab me some magazines? I'd like them today," and so on. It felt like I was doing more personal errands than actual nursing tasks. Come to think of it, she would make such small demands back in high school too. I never imagined she'd still be this way as an adult. Feeling a bit overwhelmed, I discussed this with another nurse, expecting some understanding, but I got a surprising reply. Demanding? Catherine, I've never noticed that. Moreover, not just one but all the other nurses seemed to feel the same way. A lot of Catherine's colleagues came to visit her at the hospital. I subtly asked them about Catherine's character at work, and everyone had nothing but praise for her. They said she's efficient at her job and communicates well with everyone, making the work environment smooth. This means Catherine's demanding behavior is directed only at me. Towards other nurses and people around, Catherine was courteous and had a good reputation. That's why I finally confronted Catherine about her behavior. Why aren't you this demanding with other nurses? What's wrong with me? It's not that. I don't dislike you or anything. For once, even Catherine looked demure. I left her room that day with the air heavy between us. But in the end, she never told me why she was only demanding with me. I think it is too much just because we were just classmates. But the next day, I started to regret a bit. Being hospitalized for so long and taking time off work must be tiring for Catherine. She might just want to be a bit demanding sometimes. I realized that I might have treated her more as a former classmate than a patient. As a nurse, I should first consider the patient's feelings. Thinking I should talk to Catherine again, I went to visit her in her room. But I couldn't enter right away because I heard voices from inside. From the hospital room came the stunned voice of an elderly man. Being hospitalized for a stomach ulcer is an exaggeration. Don't tell me it's because of work stress. Pathetic. Taking time off. I'm really disappointed in you. Dad, bye. Catherine's voice was so weak, I could hardly believe it was her. I guess leaving the company to a woman like you is impossible. You should have just stayed at home, learned to be a proper wife, and agreed to the arranged marriage I set up for you. That's probably all you're good for. From the conversation, the man seemed to be Catherine's father, but what he was saying was incredibly harsh. Ever since middle school and high school, Catherine had admired her father and worked hard to take over the company. From what I've heard from her colleagues, she has been continuously putting in the effort and is competent at her job. I wondered how her stomach ulcer got this bad, and maybe it has something to do with her father. Perhaps she overworked herself, trying to gain her father's approval. Come on, Catherine, stand up for yourself. I silently urged her in my heart, but my wishes weren't conveyed. All I heard was a soft, "I'm truly sorry," from Catherine. Her voice tightened my chest. Maybe it's my fault for giving you time and waiting. You've been a disappointment. Forget about work in the company. I'll arrange another match for you. To his words, Catherine's voice overlapped with tears. Please wait, I can still do it. I believe I can be of use. But her desperate plea went unheard. I clearly heard a heavy sigh from Catherine's father from outside the room. Sigh. Marrying into a beneficial business would be much more useful for the company. After saying just that, he left without lending an ear to Catherine's pleas. Nurses probably shouldn't get involved in the personal matters of patients and their families. But at that moment, as a friend, I couldn't just stand by and watch him walk away. Wait, please. Ever since she was a student, she's looked up to you and dreamt of taking over the company. She's continuously worked hard for it. Can't you at least recognize her efforts? Catherine's father looked at me perplexed. You're just a nurse, right? It's not your place to comment. I understand that, but as a friend, I tried to persist, but he interrupted. I'm in a hurry, and left. Without a hint of being moved by my words, he left with a cold expression. Back in the room, Catherine was crying. She covered her face with both hands, trying to hide her tears. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. I apologized like that. In her usual assertive tone, Catherine responded, You really shouldn't have, I'm fine. Then, I held out my right hand to her. Then, show me your hand right now. Huh? Hearing my words, Catherine became hesitant, covering the back of her hand with her other hand. I gently took Catherine's hand in mine. The back of her hand was red. Some spots even looked like they had turned into bruises. Truth be told, since her admission, both the doctors and the nurses had noticed marks on the back of Catherine's hands, as if they'd been pinched. But when another nurse first inquired about it, Catherine seemed to try to hide them. So, the hospital staff was waiting for the right moment to ask her again. And just a short while ago, I accidentally saw it through the small glass on the door. While being berated by her father, Catherine had been digging her nails into the back of her own hand. I asked as gently as I could. "You do this from time to time." Catherine remained silent for a bit, but eventually she shared the truth. Apparently, she does it when she feels an excessive amount of stress. "It's pathetic. I can't even work well enough to gain my father's approval, and yet I'm so mentally fragile. I remember her being so confident back in our school days. But now, she seemed to have lost that confidence. Given the harsh words she'd received from her father while being sick in the hospital, it might not be surprising that she felt this way. Don't tell anyone," I cried. "Okay, I know you've seen me at my worst since our school days, but I don't want to show my weaknesses to others," she said. It was then that I realized her whims that were exclusively for me were because she trusted me, knowing her stubborn side, and maybe a bit of dependence. Realizing that, I couldn't help but want to support her, seeing how hardworking and clumsy she can be. "I won't say a thing, but hey, you can tell me anything. I might not be able to offer advice or solutions, but I'll always listen." Catherine gave a small smile and said, "Thank you." During the rest of her stay in the hospital, Catherine's selfishness was hushed up, and we spent most of our time talking leisurely. Perhaps Catherine needed a place where she could vent and show her vulnerabilities. She had decided to take an extended break from work. After her discharge, Catherine and I began to occasionally meet up and go out for meals. She had returned to work, but instead of diving back in full throttle, she seemed to be taking things more slowly. Spending time with me, I think she pondered on how to work while also taking care of herself. I was curious about her relationship with her father, but I decided not to ask until she brought it up. Still, her expression seemed brighter compared to when she was in the hospital. So, I chose to watch over her a little longer. During our fourth dinner together, I confessed my feelings to Catherine. Sadly, she turned me down. However, she did ask if I could wait a little longer. Of course, I asked her why, but she didn't tell me. But since she asked me to wait, I felt I had no other choice. 3 months later, out of the blue, she told me, I quit my job. After her discharge, her father had apparently tried to push forward with a marriage arrangement. But Catherine simply couldn't accept that and decided to distance herself from her father. "You sure about that? Weren't you saying since school that you wanted to take over your dad's company?" I asked. To that, she laughed and said, "I'm over it. Being with you, you've affirmed every part of me. I felt like I was able to breathe properly for the first time in ages. Food tastes better, and I sleep soundly. I realized I hadn't been taking care of myself at all. From now on, I want to live in an environment where I'm accepted for who I am." Her smile as she said this was genuine and unclouded. "So, will you stand by me as I make a fresh start?" she asked. I responded with an enthusiastic "of course," and hugged her. I was overjoyed to see her moving forward while cherishing herself. And so, our romantic relationship began. 2 years have passed since then, and Catherine is now working hard at a company different from her father's. I proposed to her recently, got the green light, and we plan to marry soon. After Catherine left her father's company, Catherine's father was apparently severely scolded by her mother. She told him, "Your way of thinking is too old-fashioned. Change your ways or we're getting a divorce." It seems that was the wake-up call for Catherine's father. But as we know, people don't change overnight. Nevertheless, it seems he's gradually coming to accept Catherine. We managed to chat a bit when we visited him to formally announce our engagement. Apparently, his excessive expectations stemmed from the fact that she's his daughter. Both Catherine and her father seem to have a mutual desire to reconcile. Their relationship may still be somewhat strained, but I hope I can help bridge the gap between them. I'm certain their relationship can be mended. After all, Catherine's father has a wife who isn't afraid to scold him, and Catherine has me by her side. I believe that when people have someone to lean on, they can become kinder and continue to move forward with hope. This is the story of how my wife and I met. Thank you for listening to my story about the woman I adore most in the world. I hope to continue building a happy home with her while I am under my wife's thumb.